Aisha Torres stood near the observation window of the Song of Dawn and tried not to feel small. The view outside was stunning. A quiet gas giant spinning lazily below, its clouds painted in soft golds and deep violet swirls. The ship was elegant, built with curves and feathers in mind, a design that reflected the culture of the Urkai. Everything around her seemed meant for someone taller, slimmer, and far more graceful than a human like her. The Urkai crew moved about the deck with their usual smooth steps, their soft wing feathers catching the light as they passed. They were not cruel by nature, but they were proud, and pride often made them sharp. Aisha had heard the whispers again that morning. There goes Muddy Feathers. It was the nickname they had given her on the first day, because she was clumsy, because her brown jumpsuit looked dull compared to their shining uniforms, because she was human. Aisha kept her shoulders straight and her face calm. She had learned that showing frustration only made the teasing worse. Instead, she focused on her station, monitoring atmospheric readings from the small moon they were surveying. The moon was quiet, its thin clouds drifting in lazy patterns. Still, something in the numbers bothered her. "Lieutenant Shea," she said, calling out to the navigation officer, "I'm reading strange magnetic interference from the moon's surface. It's too regular to be natural." Shea turned his narrow feathered head toward her, his silver crest flicking in mild annoyance. "Your instruments must be miscalibrated, human. The Urkai have mapped thousands of moons like this. There is nothing unusual here." Aisha bit back the urge to argue. "I double-checked the calibration. The readings are repeating in a pattern, almost like a signal." The ship's captain, Aravel, glanced over from her high chair at the center of the deck. Her golden feathers were perfectly groomed, her eyes sharp as a blade. "A signal?" she asked, her tone cool. "Yes, Captain," Aisha said, straightening. "It might be some kind of old beacon or automated system. If we stay in orbit, it might interfere with communications." The captain's feathers flared slightly, a sign of irritation. "We are here for a simple mineral survey, human. Your concerns are noted, but we will continue as planned." Aisha sat back down, feeling heat rise in her face. Noted. That was what they always said before they ignored her. She had been sent here as a cultural exchange, a token human presence on a Urkai mission, meant to show unity between species. In truth, it felt like she was just here to fill a quota. Hours passed. The crew went about their work, graceful and efficient, while Aisha kept her eyes on her console. The strange pattern kept appearing. It pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat, and every pulse grew stronger. Then the first alarm sounded. "Gravitational drift," Shai shouted, his feathers standing on end. The Song of Dawn lurched as if a giant hand had grabbed it. Aisha gripped her console. "It's coming from the moon. The interference is pulling us in." "Impossible!" another officer snapped. But the numbers did not lie. The ship's orbit was decaying, their engines straining to keep them from falling toward the surface. Captain Ara stood, her wings flaring wide. "Stabilize thrusters. Prepare for evasive action." The deck filled with the sound of commands and alarms, but nothing stopped the invisible pull. The elegant vessel shuddered as its systems strained against the unseen force. "It's not natural," Aisha shouted over the noise. "It's a trap. Something is locking us here." This time the captain did not ignore her. She turned sharply. "Explain." Aisha brought the pattern up on the main display. "Look, this signal is too precise. Something down there is pulling us in on purpose. If we don't act now, we'll crash." For a long moment, silence filled the bridge except for the hum of straining engines. Then Captain Ara nodded slowly. "Very well, human. Locate the source of this trap." Aisha's hands flew over the controls, heart pounding. For the first time since she had boarded this ship, the crew was listening to her. After several tense minutes, she pointed to a sector on the moon's surface. "Here, deep in the northern mudflats. Whatever is down there, it's powerful enough to hold us." Captain Ara's crest feathers smoothed down as she considered the display. "Prepare a probe," she ordered. "We will confirm the humans' findings." Aisha sat back, chest tight with relief. They believed her, at least enough to investigate. But as the probe launched, she could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Something down there had noticed them. Something wanted them to stay, and Aisha Torres, Muddy Feathers, might be the only one who could figure out why. The probe sent by the Song of Dawn descended through the thin clouds, its cameras sending back grainy images of the muddy surface below. Aisha leaned forward in her seat as the feed played across the main display. At first, the flats looked empty, just endless brown and gray mud broken by shallow pools of water. Then something glinted under the surface. "Zoom in," Captain Ara ordered. The camera focused. Under the mud lay rows of strange metallic shapes, almost like ribs of a buried creature. As the probe passed over them, Aisha saw that the shapes were too precise to be natural. They formed rings, each one glowing faintly with the same pattern she had seen on her console. "It's a machine," Aisha whispered. The Yurkai crew shifted uncomfortably, their feathers ruffling. Machines like this were ancient and dangerous. Most had been destroyed long ago after the Great Machine Wars that had nearly wiped out the Yurkai centuries earlier. "The signal is coming from there," Aisha said. "If we can shut it down, we might break free of its pull." Lieutenant Shea turned toward the captain. "Captain, we cannot risk sending crew down there. The surface is unstable, and if the machine activates further, it could destroy the ship. And yet we cannot leave," Captain Ara replied calmly. Her golden feathers gleamed in the light of the display. Then she turned her sharp eyes toward Aisha. "You are the one who noticed the trap first. Do you believe you can shut it down?" Aisha froze. The question hung heavy in the air. She was a junior systems specialist, not an engineer or a soldier. But she also knew that if they stayed in orbit, they would eventually be dragged down into the mud and crushed. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I can try." There was a ripple of surprise through the crew. Shay clicked his beak softly. "Captain, sending the human alone is—" She volunteered. Captain Ara cut him off. "Prepare a shuttle. Give her whatever she needs." Aisha felt a rush of fear and determination as she followed two Yurkai technicians to the hangar. They equipped her with a lightweight suit, a scanner, and a portable EMP charge, just in case she needed to disable whatever she found. "Do not get stuck in the mud," one of them said flatly. "Our craft are not designed for human rescue." "Thanks for the encouragement," Aisha muttered, pulling on her helmet. Moments later, the small shuttle broke away from the Song of Dawn and descended toward the moon's surface. The ride was rough, the craft shaking as the strange gravitational pull tugged at it. Aisha gripped the controls tightly, trying to keep the shuttle steady. When she landed, the mud splashed up against the cockpit window, thick and dark. She stepped out carefully, each boot sinking into the sticky ground. The air was thin but breathable, and it smelled faintly metallic like wet rust. The scanner beeped softly, guiding her toward the buried structures. The mud sucked at her feet with every step, making her progress slow and tiring. Her suit was soon coated in brown slime, and she could almost hear the Yurkai back on the ship laughing at how muddy feathers looked now. Finally, she reached one of the strange ribs sticking out of the ground. Up close, it was massive, easily 3 times her height and covered in strange patterns. She brushed away mud and placed the scanner against it. "This thing is old," she said into her comm. "At least 1,000 years, maybe more. But it's still active. Can you disable it?" Captain Ara's voice crackled in her ear. "I think so. The power source is deep underground, but there's a control node nearby." She followed the scanner until she found a small, half-buried dome. Aisha knelt in the mud, wiping it clean. Her fingers flew over the control panel on her wrist as she tried to interface with the ancient machine. The system was primitive but still running. Strange symbols scrolled across her screen. It almost looked like a warning. Before she could translate it, the ground trembled. "Aisha, what is happening?" The captain's voice was sharp. "The system just woke up," Aisha said. "I think it detected me." From the mud around her, shapes began to rise. They were small, spider-like drones, their metal shells dripping with sludge. Their single red sensors glowed faintly as they turned toward her. Her heart pounded. "I've got company down here." "Return to the shuttle," the captain ordered. "No time," Aisha said, already typing furiously into her wrist console. If she left now, the system might fully activate and crush the Song of Dawn in orbit. She forced herself to focus, overriding the machine's basic commands. The drones closed in, their legs clicking softly against the mud. Finally, she found what she was looking for, a shutdown protocol buried deep in the system. She triggered it, but instead of shutting down, the control node let out a loud pulse of energy that knocked her back into the mud. "Aisha," the captain's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. "I'm okay," Aisha gasped, pulling herself up, but it didn't shut down. It changed modes. Now it's fully active. Above her, The sky darkened as more drones began rising from the mud, spreading out across the flats. "They're preparing for an attack," Aisha said, fear creeping into her voice. "And they know exactly where we are." The mud shook under Aisha's boots as more drones climbed from the ground, their spindly legs glinting in the pale light. They were not large, but there were too many. If they reached the control node, they would likely reactivate even stronger defenses. "Aisha, get to the shuttle." Captain Ara's command was sharp in her ear. "I can't," Aisha shouted back. She ran toward the shuttle anyway, mud splashing high with every step. One of the drones skittered close, its metal legs clicking, and fired a thin beam of light that scorched the ground near her feet. Aisha dove into the shuttle and slammed the hatch closed. The small craft shuddered as something struck its side. She powered the engines and took off, the mud flat spinning below her. But as soon as she gained altitude, the drones reacted. From the ground, dozens of them launched into the air, their wings snapping open like knives. They chased her shuttle, flying in perfect formation. "They're airborne now," she yelled into the comm. "We see them," Captain Ara replied grimly. "They are heading for the Song of Dawn." Aisha's stomach dropped. The ship was still in a decaying orbit. It wouldn't be able to fight and hold position at the same time. "Send me a fighter," she said suddenly. There was silence for a moment, then a hiss of disbelief from Shay. "A fighter? Humans are not trained for Yurkai combat craft." "I don't need training," Aisha snapped. "I just need something faster than this shuttle. If we don't stop those drones now, we're all finished." Captain Ara's voice was calm but cold. "Shay, prepare a fighter for remote launch. The human will take it." "You can't be serious." "That is an order," the captain said, ending the discussion. Moments later, a small, sleek fighter shot from the Song of Dawn's hangar bay and flew toward Aisha's shuttle. She matched speed, clambered into the fighter, and strapped in. The cockpit was tight, the controls built for taloned hands rather than human fingers, but she managed. "All right," she muttered to herself. "Let's see if human chaos can beat machine order." She hit the thrusters, and the fighter leapt forward with dizzying speed. The swarm of drones locked onto her instantly, peeling away from their formation and diving after her. Instead of running straight for the ship, Aisha pulled the fighter into a hard turn, nearly blacking out from the force. The drones followed, but their perfect arcs couldn't match her wild, unpredictable path. She dove toward the mudflat, skimmed just above the surface, then shot upward again. The Yurkai crew watched from the bridge, their feathers ruffled in shock. "She flies like a hatchling chasing fireflies," one muttered. "Look again," Captain Ara said softly. "The drones are breaking formation." She was right. The perfect, dangerous unity of the swarm was unraveling as they tried to keep up with Aisha's reckless maneuvers. One clipped another in midair and exploded in a burst of fire and mud. Aisha grinned despite the fear pounding in her chest. "Come on, you little machines. Follow me." She led them farther and farther away from the Song of Dawn, zigzagging across the sky, diving through canyons of wet rock and kicking up sprays of mud. The fighter's wings clipped the ground twice, leaving long scars in the dirt, but she didn't stop. Finally, she spotted a cluster of drones guarding what looked like a tall antenna, half buried in the flats. It pulsed with faint light, probably a relay for the system's control network. "This is it," she said. "If I can knock that thing down, it might cut their coordination." "You won't survive a direct attack," Shay warned from the ship. "Then I'll make it a messy attack," Aisha replied. She roared straight toward the relay, forcing the pursuing drones to follow her in a tight line. At the last second, she cut engines and let the fighter drop, then reignited them and pulled up hard. The sudden maneuver caused the drones behind her to smash into the relay in a chain of explosions. The antenna collapsed, the light inside it going dark. On the bridge of the Song of Dawn, the crew erupted in cheers as the rest of the drones faltered midair, their movements suddenly clumsy and uncoordinated. "Human, return to the ship," Captain Ara said, her voice unusually warm. "You have done enough for now." Aisha's fighter was battered, its left wing trailing smoke, but she managed to bring it back aboard the ship's hangar. As she climbed out of the cockpit, her legs shook with exhaustion. The hangar crew stared at her, their feathers fluffed in surprise. None of them said muddy feathers this time. They simply watched as she pulled off her helmet, her face streaked with sweat and mud. "Report to the bridge," Captain Ara's voice came again. Aisha nodded and walked through the quiet corridors. For the first time since joining the crew, she did not feel like an outsider. She had just saved their lives, and she knew this was only the beginning. Above the moon, the sky was quiet for now. But the buried machines were still active, and the fight was not over. The Song of Dawn trembled as more drones rose from the moon's muddy surface. Their numbers were greater than anyone expected, hundreds of metal shapes skimming through the thin air with sharp precision. The sky above the moon darkened as mud and dust swirled in a chaotic storm, kicked up by their movement. Aisha Torres stood on the hangar deck, watching the view through the reinforced glass. Her suit was still smeared with mud from her earlier sortie, but there was no time to clean herself. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. If the crew couldn't stop the drones, the ship would be pulled into the moon below. Captain Ara turned to her, her golden feathers bristling. "Human, we need your help again. Can you coordinate a counterattack?" Aisha nodded. Her hands moved over the console, her mind racing. She had learned something from flying the fighter earlier. The drones reacted poorly to unpredictability. Straight paths, precise formations, those were what they were built to follow. But humans moved differently. They improvised. "I can do it," Aisha said, "but I need control of the auxiliary fighters. I can draw the drones away from the ship, buy us time." The Uruk-hai hesitated. Their species valued precision, strategy, and flawless execution. Humans were chaotic, unpredictable, dangerous. But Captain Ara's eyes were sharp and decisive. "Do it now!" Within minutes, Aisha was seated in the first auxiliary fighter. Her squadron of Uruk-hai pilots waited nearby, their crests twitching nervously. She looked at them. "Follow my lead. Trust me." One pilot, a young Uruk-hai named Kalis, tilted his head. "Trust a human? Are you serious?" Aisha smirked. "Just watch." The fighters launched, streaking into the thickening mudstorm. Aisha led the way, darting through pockets of thick clouds, dipping and weaving, spinning around jagged rock outcroppings. The drones followed immediately, their perfect formations breaking apart as they tried to keep up. Above the chaos, the crew of the Song of Dawn watched in tense silence. The main thrusters strained as the ship held its position. Aisha's movements were wild, almost reckless, but they worked. The drones, confused by her erratic flying, collided with one another, sending sparks and mud flying across the sky. "This is incredible," one technician whispered. "She's controlling them by being unpredictable." Aisha's fighter swooped low, brushing over a mud pool. A drone followed, miscalculating the maneuver, and crashed. Another tried to flank her from above, but she flipped the craft at the last moment, forcing it into a mud crater. "This is just the beginning," Aisha muttered to herself, adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she led the swarm away, she noticed the relay towers still glowing faintly in the distance. The drones were linked through them. If she could disable the towers, the drones would lose coordination entirely. She pulled the fighter into a steep dive, targeting the first tower with her onboard missile system. The missile struck, and the tower exploded in a flash of light and mud. Immediately, several drones lost formation, falling like leaves from a tree. Aisha's eyes sparkled with determination. "Yes, keep it up." She relayed commands to the Uruk-hai pilots, guiding them to target the remaining towers. It was a delicate dance, one where precision met improvisation. Humans were unpredictable, but combined with the Uruk-hai's skill, the attack was devastatingly effective. The sky over the moon became a chaotic storm of machines and fighters, mud and sparks flying in every direction. Aisha pushed her fighter to the limits, dodging debris, flipping over fallen drones, and leading her squadron in sweeping arcs. Every tower she destroyed weakened the swarm. Every move she made forced the drones further from the Song of Dawn. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last tower collapsed into the mud. The remaining drones faltered, their red sensors flickering before going dark. The storm slowly subsided, leaving silence above the muddy flats. Aisha's fighter drifted down to the hangar deck, engines smoking but intact. She climbed out, breathing hard, her body trembling with exhaustion. The Uruk-hai pilots who had doubted her now looked at her with awe. Captain Ara approached, her feathers smooth and her eyes bright. "Human, you have done something remarkable today. You took a chaotic situation and turned it into an advantage. You have saved this ship." Aisha wiped mud from her face, feeling a sense of pride she had rarely known. The crew no longer whispered muddy feathers. Instead, their eyes held respect. "Thank you," she said quietly, though her heart still raced. She knew the danger was not completely gone. The machines were old and the moon was full of secrets. But for now, the Song of Dawn was safe, and the crew had seen what a human could do when faced with impossible odds. As the storm cleared, Aisha looked out at the horizon. The moon was quiet again, its muddy flat still and calm. But somewhere beneath the surface, hidden machines waited, and she knew that soon they would rise again. This time she would be ready. The mud flats were quiet now, the storm of drones and machines reduced to broken remnants scattered across the surface. The Song of Dawn hovered steadily above, its thrusters barely straining. For the first time since the mission began, the Yurkai crew could breathe. Aisha Torres stepped onto the hangar deck, her boots still caked in mud. She had flown, fought and survived, but exhaustion weighed heavily on her. Her muscles ached, and her suit was torn in several places, yet she stood tall. The crew's eyes followed her, no longer filled with mockery but with admiration. Captain Ara approached, her golden feathers gleaming in the ship's soft lights. She stopped a few feet from Aisha and folded her wings calmly. "You have done more than any human could have been expected to do," she said. Her voice carried a quiet authority that made the entire hangar still. Aisha shook her head, trying to hide a smile. "I just did what had to be done," she said. "No," the captain replied, stepping closer. "You went beyond what had to be done. You risked yourself to protect this crew. Your actions were remarkable." The other Yurkai crew members murmured among themselves. For years, humans had been considered weak, token figures on interstellar missions. And here was Aisha standing mud-streaked, covered in scratches yet victorious against machines that had threatened the pride of the Yurkai fleet. "Come with me," Captain Ara said, leading Aisha toward the bridge. The bridge was quieter than usual. Normally it buzzed with energy and coordinated movements. Now the crew paused to watch the human who had just saved them. Aisha could feel the weight of their gazes. But it was different this time. Respect, admiration, even awe. The captain gestured to the central platform, where a ceremonial feather, gilded and polished, rested on a small pedestal. "This is the symbol of our honor," Captain Ara explained. "It is given to those who have proven themselves in service and bravery. Today that honor is yours," Aisha blinked. "Me?" she asked softly, not sure she had heard correctly. "Yes," the captain said firmly. "From this day forward you are not just a token human. You are a part of this crew. You have earned the name Darkwing, for you moved with courage and strategy like the sharpest of our kind." The other crew members stood silently, some bowing their heads in respect. Aisha's heart swelled. No one had ever called her a hero before. The whispers of muddy feathers that had haunted her since the first day were gone. She had stepped beyond the shadow of that nickname. She reached out and took the feather. It was light yet strong, its polished surface warm under her fingers. She held it close, feeling a sense of belonging she had never felt before. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice steady despite the emotions bubbling inside her. Captain Ara nodded, a hint of a smile on her sharp features. "You proved that humans are unpredictable, yes, but also capable of brilliance and bravery. Remember that, Aisha, and remember that this crew now trusts you completely." Aisha looked around at the Yurkai faces, once skeptical, now confident in her abilities. She felt a quiet pride, not arrogance, but satisfaction. She had survived mud, machines, and impossible odds, and she had shown that humans could do more than others ever expected. Later, as she walked toward the observation deck, she paused and looked out at the moon below. The muddy flats were quiet again, but she knew the machines were still there, buried and waiting. She smiled faintly. Next time, they would be ready. Kellis, the young Yurkai pilot who had doubted her before, joined her at the observation window. "I never thought a human could do what you did," he admitted, his crest feathers twitching slightly in embarrassment. Aisha shrugged. "We're not as fragile as people think. We adapt, we improvise. And sometimes, we just have to be crazy enough to try." Kellis laughed softly. "You were crazy. And it worked." Above the moon, the stars twinkled with a quiet brilliance. The Song of Dawn floated safely in orbit, its crew united and stronger than ever. Aisha, Darkwing, stood among them not as a token but as a hero. Mud, feathers, and all. She knew that the galaxy was vast, full of dangers and mysteries, but for the first time she felt confident that humans could meet those challenges, not just survive, but excel. And somewhere deep inside, a small, satisfied thought whispered to her, "Muddy feathers, Maybe. But strong feathers, too.